Sometimes the hardest part of this business isn't turning the wrench, it's figuring out what fluids go in the car. Today we're working on a 2016 Hyundai Veloster with a 7-speed dual clutch transmission, and what should have been a simple fluid service turned into a full-blown mystery. The owner's manual says it takes HK MTF 70 weight oil, Shell Spirox S6 GHME 70 weight oil, and a couple of other equivalent options. But the service manuals list a 75W85 manual transmission oil, and even the dealership told us the same thing. The question is, which one is right? This is one of those times where you realize even the factory and the dealer systems don't always agree. Today, we're going to dig into this contradiction, figure out what the real answer is, and talk about why it matters so much to get it right. In theory, finding the correct fluid should be straightforward. The manufacturer publishes the specs, the dealer confirms it, and the information should match. But in reality, it's not always that simple. To the best of my knowledge, this 2016 Hyundai Veloster came with two transmissions, a 6-speed manual gearbox and a 7-speed automatically shifted dual clutch system. And that's where the confusion starts. The systems look similar in the databases, and fluid listings often get lumped together, but they're completely different inside. A manual transmission uses oil mainly for gear and synchronizer lubrication. That's where you'd expect to see the 75W85 GL4 gear oil listed. But the dual clutch transmission is a little bit different animal. It has electronic shift actuators, 2 clutch discs, an electronic control system that all rely on a very specific oil with controlled chemical characteristics. That's where the HK MTF 70 weight or Spirox S6 GHME 70 weight fluids are engineered for. If you put manual gear oil in a dual clutch transmission, the viscosity and additives could be wrong. You could end up with slow shifting, clutch drag, or component failure. So when the owner's manual says HK MTF 70 weight and the dealer says 75W85, the only safe move is to trust the engineering spec. The people writing the manuals are closer to the design engineers than the parts counter are. And that's the takeaway here. Don't assume every source is right, even when it's official. As technicians, sometimes our job is to be detectives and not just mechanics. We're living in a world where every car has some kind of specialty fluid in it, and they've become critical over the last 10 or 15 years. There was a time when we had a standard transmission fluid. We could put just about any oil in a car. It really didn't make a whole lot of difference. The manufacturers didn't care. The cars didn't care. In today's modern cars and modern technology and chemical analysis and all the things these engineers are trying to achieve with their fluids, we have to be extra careful here that we're putting the correct fluids in cars. So when this car came along for a simple transmission service, and we called the dealership and said, we need some dual clutch transmission fluid. We knew this had a dual clutch system in it, and we knew it took something special in there. And we figured the safest bet is just to get it from the dealership. We didn't want to put any kind of generic fluid in here. So the dealership sent us over a couple of quarts of this fluid in the gray bottle here. This is the Hyundai manual transmission fluid, 75W85. Now I said to myself, I knew this car had a couple of different transmissions in it. And I said, I didn't think it was going to take this manual gearbox fluid. I figured it would probably say dual clutch fluid on it or something along those lines. So I said, let me do a little research here. I looked in my parts catalog. It's coming up with a 75W85 GL4 fluid. I looked it up on my repair systems, All Data and Identifix. They're confirming the same thing for this dual clutch car. But then they're showing a separate system for the dual clutch that's calling for this HK fluid. So I said, let me call the dealership back. Let's get the VIN number over to them again. Let's make sure they confirm the information. And he says, yeah, no problem. This is the fluid that it's calling for this car. And he said, let me just send you over my spec sheet on it. So he sent us over this spec sheet. And on here it says that the EcoShift dual clutch transmission fluid for the GDI system, non-turbo, takes a 75W85. It's got a part number on here. And I said, well, that doesn't make any sense because I looked in the owner's manual. The owner's manual clearly says on here that we've got a EcoShift dual clutch transmission. And then in the owner's manual, when we read it, it says in there the only option for it is the HK manual gearbox fluid or the Spirox fluid, which is the equivalent, and a couple of other equivalent choices, all of them a straight 70 weight oil. So now we're having a little bit of confusion here with this car because we don't know exactly what it's supposed to take. The dealership's telling us one thing, the manufacturer and the engineers are telling us to put something else in it. So my guess here is that the dealership is wrong. We've got on this sheet they send us, they're telling us the Velosters, the 2012 to 2018, this is the chart for all of those cars, right? And then we've got a vehicle here, it's a 2016, and it's calling for a very specific fluid. So in my world, I'd rather err on the side of the caution. I think the Veloster owner's manual that came with the car should have the correct fluid in it. It doesn't list a 75W85 in there. So we said, let's take a sample of the fluid. We've got some fluid here, and then we've got, this is what came out of this gray bottle. This is what came out of this HK fluid. Let me wind this up a little, because you notice on here it doesn't say dual clutch transmission fluid. It just says manual transmission fluid, as this says manual transmission fluid, and a different weight, okay? So the question is, did somewhere along the line, did the manufacturer decide they didn't need a special fluid for this? Did they originally release this car requiring this special HK fluid, 70 weight only, and then somewhere down the line they revised their information and said, hey, listen, we've got this special fluid we're putting in these cars, we don't need to do that, let's just use this gear oil we got over here. Maybe it's less expensive, perhaps it's this is just a mineral-based oil and this is a semi-synthetic. I don't know. There's no way to find that out. I tried to look for specs on it. I can't really dig anything up. So it is possible that somewhere along the lines, the manufacturer said, you know what, we scratched that. We don't need to do that anymore. And they didn't get a chance to update the manual, obviously, because it's been sitting in the glove box since 2016. We don't know. But I want to say that in our field, I'd rather err on the side of caution. I'd rather get the fluid that the owner's manual states for it. And I can tell you also, I've taken a sample of these things. This is brand new fluid. Brand new fluid. They look different. This one looks more like gear oil than this one, but this one smells more like gear oil than the other one. Now I'm trying to compare them to the oil we drained out of there. Color is not going to help because we've got some dirty fluid in it. That's why we're servicing it. By smell, these two smell more alike to me. And then over here to my counterparts, these two smell more alike. So we're in a little bit of a conundrum here of what the difference is. At the end of the day, we don't know, is it going to make a difference or not? There's probably some chemical difference between the two. Obviously, the weights are different. So we want to make sure we're putting the correct fluid in there, and that's what we're going to do. We've got to perform this service. I figured I might as well show you what it entails anyway, give you a couple little looks here at what the dual clutch transmission actually looks like. Let's get up in the air and take a peek. I got my drain bucket ready. I'm just going to remove the fill plug here. It's right above this actuator, and it's got an 8mm Allen head on it. Pop that out. All right, I've got a washer on there. And then I'm going to go ahead and remove the drain over here at the bottom of this. Using a 24mm socket for the drain. Let's see what the condition of this looks like here. Should match what we had in our cup. And then I was going to measure what came out of it. We'll see if we can capture this in a bucket. And see if we can get the 2 or so quarts it says it takes in the manual. We'll let that drain for a couple minutes. All right, while that's draining, I'm going to fill up my tool over here. If you guys have watched any of my other fluid service videos, I'll be using my Mighty Vac transmission fill tool. Let's go ahead and put a couple of quarts in this thing. So again, I'm putting in the part number for the dual clutch transmission fluid, okay? This is the 70 weight oil. We can reinstall our tool. And we'll be all set. So it looks like we're just about done draining here, and we've got just about 2 quarts worth that came out of this vehicle. Let's go ahead and get our drain plug back in. As with any job, it's a good idea to put a new drain plug gasket, a new fill plug gasket on your plugs. I'm going to torque this to 45 foot-pounds. I'll try to keep this where you can see it. We're just going to pump this canister up, try to get some pressure in the system. And I'll be using this little hook adapter that I've installed on it. This is going to allow me to get in that hole just behind the electronic actuator, this little motor that you're looking at here. And that's where our fill plug is. Now, here we go. We're going to stick this in the hole, and hopefully this fluid will go where we want it to. Oops. Right, yeah. Okay. So open my valve on my Mighty Vac tool, and we're just going to maintain the pressure in here until we get our full 2 quarts back in there. Now, I didn't intentionally make a video about this service here. I think this is pretty straightforward. It's good to see how the process works in here, but it's not a terribly difficult service to perform. You've got a drain plug and a fill plug, no filter to change. I think the hardest part of this job is selecting the correct fluid, and that's why we thought we'd make a video about this, because so often we have all these fluid choices on these cars, and some people think one's better than the other, one's different than the other. There's a lot of opinions on fluids, but there's not a lot of facts. The only ones that have the facts are the engineers. So this is why I always side with the engineer. If they decided that a particular fluid belongs in a car, then I think that's probably what we should put in it. They should know better than the rest of us. And I won't disagree. There are plenty of examples where there's aftermarket fluids that are superior or enhancements to what the OE manufacturer has engineered. In that case, obviously, you could go with a better fluid. Maybe it's a synthetic fluid versus a conventional. Certainly tons of choices out there, and I'm not saying that any of these fluids that you may put in there are necessarily going to cause any damage. We just don't necessarily know. So I'd rather stick with the factory-approved recommendations. And I can also tell you there's a lot of options. So when I looked at the fluid options for this, as you saw in the owner's manual, there are so many different choices for fluid brands and types that you can put in here. They're all 70 weights. That's what it calls for in the manual. So we're pretty sure we need a 70 weight in here, but not all of them are the same brand. So that just tells you that there's lots of options in here. Most of these fluids are compatible with the OE fluid, and you know, you're not going to go terribly wrong using any of the ones that they've recommended, obviously. I think weight might be the determining factor in here. 75, 85 multi-viscosity versus a straight 70 weight. So we're just about out of fluid here. We're running right up to the top. Before I cap this up, I just want to stick my little dipstick in here and kind of see where this fluid level sits on this. Okay, so I can see on here, when I check with this thing, it's all the way, I've stuck it in there so this sits flat with the bottom of the hole. So if the hole was here, I'd stick it in there and sit it in here like this, and the fluid level is right up to the bottom of the hole. So normally this is how you would check these manual gearboxes. They fill to the bottom of the hole on a lot of cars. So we have a spec here of 2 quarts, and then when I check it, 2 quarts I've put in, and 2 quarts seems to have filled it right to the level where it needs to be. I know it's hard to see. I can't show you on camera because this fluid is so clean and clear. It doesn't show up well on this white zip tie that I have, but we're right there. So let's go ahead and install the fill plug, and we'll torque that down as well. I just want to take a little bit of cleaner and clean up some of this oil mess. We don't want to leave any residual oil on the transmission where it can drip on the ground, make a mess, or look like it has a leak. So what did we really learn today? Well, even with the factory data, dealership advice, and professional databases, you can still end up with conflicting information. I think the key is just to slow down, verify the specs directly from the owner's manual, understand how the system works before pouring any fluid in. These tips will go a long way. The Veloster 7-speed DCT specifically calls for an HK MTF 70 weight or that Shell Spirox or other alternatives, but not the 75W85 manual transmission gear oil. And that difference might actually matter. If you've ever run into this type of conflicting service info, drop a comment below and tell me what you found. I'd love to hear your story. And if this video helped you clear things up a little bit, hit that like button, subscribe to the OrtoTech Garage, and ring the bell so you don't miss our next real-world repair. Stick around, there's another video right here that dives deeper into this dual clutch style transmission you might want to see. We're going to pull it all apart for you.